do want to shift the focus from Philippians. We've been talking for several weeks, about 2 months in the book of Philippians. And I want to preach from this subject because it is an important subject that we need to discuss. I don't want to preach a traditional Mother's Day message, but I want to look at this particular subject because it is an important subject. There were 2 or 3 subjects I wanted to put with this text. This is what is called in the seminary where I attend and completed this past Thursday. It's called topical preaching. Preaching where you get a particular subject and you tag it with a text to unfold your topical discussion. And I'm going to look at this because Solomon says something that is important. Solomon says something that is significant. Solomon speaks to the value of friendship. But he really goes even deeper than that. As I looked at this particular text and studied this particular text, Solomon talks about the importance of 2 things. He talks about the value of building relationships and the value of changing relationships. Solomon says that relationships need to be built, but in chapter 3 he talks about there is a time for everything. Everything has a season and a time. The primary thing he focuses on in chapter 3 is the changing of times, the changing of seasons, how things in your life change rapidly. Sometimes they change over time, sometimes they change expectedly, and sometimes they change unexpectedly. And so he carries that theme over into chapter 4, and he talks about building relationships. But he also talks about within building relationships change.
Yeah.
I want to look at this because on this Mother's Day and in this season of life, all of us are getting older. We're all experiencing change. My brothers and sisters, relationships change. I really want to just in my introduction argue that relationships change. Relationships change over time. Relationships change intentionally, and sometimes they change unintentionally.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see relationships change, and sometimes the change catches you unexpected.
Yeah.
Relationship between mother and child, it begins with a great love and affection. It begins with bonding, but over time that relationship changes. Relationship started because your mama and your father, a spark happened. That spark brought them together. Whether it was because of some attraction, because of love, mutual interest, that relationship began with 2 people having a mutual affection toward each other. That mutual affection was consummated, and you are the result of that relationship. And sometimes that relationship survives time. Sometimes the relationship between your parents survives trouble and difficulties, and sometimes that relationship doesn't. Then as you grow older, you develop a relationship with your father or with your mother. And over time, that relationship changes and evolves. And sometimes even in that relationship, there are siblings born. And you develop bonds with those siblings and with those brothers and sisters that are born from that union. And as you get older, that relationship also changes. But as you get older as siblings and you go through life, through school and through careers, you might meet somebody. You might meet somebody that you want to share your life with, and then your relationship changes again. Sometimes you bond with that person and you love that person. That person loves you, and the commitment that you make to each other. And sometimes the challenges of that relationship, the vows of marriage, put the strain on that relationship because it is through better or worse, richer or poor, sickness and or death. I'm just trying to argue that relationships change. And sometimes in that relationship, you may be seated us, as those relationships also change. Because then children come. Do I have any witnesses in here that children will change your relationships? Children will cause you to bond with them. Then you spend your time to nourish, to grow them, to teach them wisdom. But as they get older, their need of you kind of wanes and gets older. And as those children get older, your relationships change. The way they used to need you, they don't need you anymore. Then that relationship changes. And then sometimes in life, my brothers and sisters, people are taken out of our lives. People are eliminated and people take an exit. People walk out of our lives. People decide to leave and then sometimes death takes them. Relationships change. Sometimes by choice, and sometimes it is unexpected. Solomon is going to talk about in verse 1 of chapter 3 that there are times and there are seasons, because things can start out one way and end up another way. Things can start out with so much excitement and enthusiasm, so much hope and promise. But over time and seasons, things change. My brothers and sisters, I need you to get this point. Things change. And because things change, people change. Because of things changing, relationships change. You have to dissolve some relationships. You have to deal with the changing circumstances of relationships. You have to deal with the fact that there are some people God has put into your life, allowed to be a part of your life, that at some point in your life, that relationship might change. It might change by choice, or it might change by force. But my brothers and sisters, I want to tell you, relationships change. And because relationships change, I want to talk about what Solomon focuses on in chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. He talks about building relationships. My brothers and sisters, there are many relationships you will experience in life. The relationship between parents, I need to go ahead and tell you this, you don't get to choose who your parents are. Every other relationship in your life, you get to choose. You get to choose who you marry. You get to choose whether you want to have children or not. But you don't get to choose who your parents are. Good or bad, happy or sad, that choice you didn't have. You didn't get to go through a store and design perfect parents. You didn't get to go into the custom store and customize what you could consider the ideal parents. You had no choice in the matter. But every other relationship you have besides your parents, you can build those relationships by your choices. You get to choose the relationships that you have outside of your parents. And my brothers and sisters, I want to tell you, relationships are important because seasons change, times change. And some people come in and some people leave. I don't want you to be sad. I don't want you to think about the relationships that have left, people that have left, because you're still here. Really, the point of this message is to tell you something very important. And that is that you need people. You cannot survive without relationships. You have to have the courage to establish new relationships. You have to step outside of the box to develop relationships that can sustain you, because you're still here, and people that you love, that you bonded with, that you cared for, that you nourished, if those people are no longer here, it is your responsibility, your obligation, it is your need to build new relationships. I don't care how sad the grief is, when somebody that you love dies, your life ain't over if you're still alive. I know you thought it was the worst thing that ever happened. But if you still here, life goes on. And because of that, you have to build new relationships. When you say to me, Pastor, I'm not a people's person. Okay. Try to go at it alone. Solomon is going to say something about it in these verses. And he's really going to talk about there are 4 critical times in your life when you need somebody. You need somebody. And I really want to emphasize that you need somebody. You need a relationship, and sometimes you can't get out of new relationships, but you got out of old relationships. You don't bond with people the way you used to bond with people. But my brothers and sisters, nevertheless, you still need people. I'm telling you, Solomon really deals with 4 critical times in your life when you're going to need somebody. Try to go at it alone. You can make it, but life is not going to be as rich, enjoyable. Life is not going to be as happy and fulfilling. Life is not going to have as much meaning if you try to go at this thing alone. You got to build new relationships. One of the biggest questions that's asked me when a husband or a wife loses a spouse, the question is, Pastor, what do I do next? And they're waiting for some great theological or philosophical answer. And the answer is real simple: move on and build new relationships. Dr. E.V. Hill lost his wife of 32 years. And not long after he lost his wife, he got remarried. And one of his church members were very critical of him remarrying after the death of his wife and having a new relationship. And she asked him, how did you do that? Are you not afraid? Are you not scared? You don't see a problem? He simply said this: they far enough apart, they ain't gonna bump into each other. You'll get that on the way home. You got to move on and develop and build new relationships. Build new bonds with people. And I want to look at this because at this time in the text, Solomon is really asking a question: what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? What is really important in life? Because this is Solomon, the man who was the wisest man that ever lived, the richest man that ever lived, the most prosperous man that ever lived, the man who denied himself nothing. Solomon says, if it's doable under the sun, I've done it. If it was something worthy of pursuit to find meaning, purpose, happiness, or pleasure, I have pursued it. But in this verse, he really breaks down what's really important in life. He's going to ask some questions, but he's going to come to some conclusions. I really don't want to move too fast in this particular text, but he says the most important thing is to know God. He says no matter what you do in life, how much success you have in life, what achievements you make in life, Don't leave this world without knowing God. Because if you do, all of your labor will be in vain. He's going to talk about this idea of the value of friendship, of the value of relationships. And I want to read just a couple of verses, and I'm going to give you 4 times in your life where you need somebody. Now listen, I know we live in a crazy world, a changing world, where people are different, things are different, you're different. But let me tell you something, you need somebody. And on this Mother's Day, I want to preach this message. Because listen, I'm a pastor, and I've seen people's lives change because people left and people have come and people have been taken out by death, but people have walked out and people could not recover. They could not restore hope, happiness, pleasure. They could not bounce back. Look at what he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, starting at verse 9. He says, 2 is better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. If one falls, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to lift him up. And if 2 lie together, they can keep warm. But how can one be warmed alone? The one may be overpowered. 2 can withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken. You may be seeing. I mean, this is some deep stuff, heavy stuff, some insightful stuff, some clear stuff. And he talks about the value of friendship, but he really emphasized the importance of building relationships. Because in chapter 3, he talks about seasons and change. And those 2 things you cannot control, times and seasons. You do know that change is going to happen whether you want it to happen or not.
Yeah.
You're going to get old whether you want to or not. You're going to get sick whether you want to or not. Your children are going to change and be different and look at you different and treat you different whether you like it or not. Things are going to change. And my brothers and sisters, the issue is when you understand that things are going to change, people are going to change, circumstances are going to change, the question is, are you going to change? Because that's the issue. You can deal with the changes of life, the seasons of life, the times in which change is coming, if you are willing to change, to adjust, so that you can handle the change that happens in your life. Solomon says seasons are going to change, circumstances and people. People are going to come out. People are going to come in. Life's just going to change. You know, I go to the barber shop, and what I discover when I'm sitting in the chair looking in the mirror, boy, I'm changing. I used to have a head full of hair. No more. It used to be dark. No more. My skin used to be untarnished by wrinkles. No more. And now I go to the gym, I ride my bike, I work out. Things are changing. I used to could run without heavy breathing, no more. I used to could get on my bike with no pain and ride my miles, but no more. Life changes. Sometimes expectedly and sometimes unexpectedly. But you know what I've learned to do is to adjust to the change. And my brothers and sisters, if you will adjust to change, since you know change is built into the human experience, you will be more emotionally healthy, spiritually grounded, and you would learn to flow with change. Let me tell you, it ain't nothing worse than a man don't realize that he's getting older, still trying to act young. Still trying to dress young, still trying to look young, and nothing more foolish than a woman who is 60 years old trying to live like she's 20. Change is coming. Now let me give you these 4 things and I'm going to be finished. 4 times in your life. Now, I'm just going to give you the one solid, but there's so many more times in your life when you need somebody. But he listed just 4. He says, first of all, in verse number 9, you need somebody when you are successful. Do you see that in the text? You need somebody in your life when you reach a point of success and achievement. You need somebody to share that success with, to celebrate you in that success, to cheer you on while you are successful, to motivate you. He says 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. My brothers and sisters, you need somebody when you are successful in life. What is the point of success? What is the point of labor? What is the point of achievement and there is nobody to celebrate it with? He says you need somebody when you are successful in life, when you labor hard to work hard. Every parent in here knows the reason why you work hard is to provide a good life for your children. Amen. To provide a better life for your children, to provide a better life for your spouse, to provide a better life for yourself. You need somebody to celebrate the successes of life, the achievements of life. Not only does he say you need somebody to help you when you become successful, but he says in the next phrase, you need somebody in your times when trouble comes. I mean, you better get this because he says, for if they fall, I want to just look at this. You need somebody when you're successful, but you also need somebody when you fall. Yeah. And my brothers and sisters, I don't care how smart, educated, intelligent, and wise you are, there are times in your life when you're going to fall. Yeah. And not all falling can be avoided. I was trying to check the mailbox this morning. I checked it 100 times, and that curve ain't moved. And this morning, I stepped off that curve, and I failed. And wasn't expecting to fall because I've never failed before. Listen, life has some falls and failures that you can't prepare for, that is unexpected in your life. And Solomon says, you need somebody in the seasons of your life, in the times in your life where you fall. Yeah. I don't want you to get too emotional. Because you had people in your life that you called on, that you depended on, that was there for you in times in your life where you have fallen. You were able to reach out to them, call them, or they called you. But there are seasons and times in your life where those people are no longer there. Then what? He says, for if they fall, one can lift up his. Because there's going to be some times when you just need somebody to lift you up. Yeah. Sometimes you fall intentionally because of your actions, and sometimes it just happens. You wasn't expecting to fall. You wasn't expecting it. If I had time, I deal with that word fall. That word fall has to do with there are some things that just happen in your life that take you down, way down. There are some things that emotionally drain you. Some things that emotionally depress you. There are some things that will take the wind out of you. That fall will be so sudden, so quick. It will be so emotional, it will be so dramatic that it will take the wind out of your sail. Do I have any witnesses in here? And Solomon says you need somebody. Because you have somebody to lift you up. Let me talk about the person that falls, but let me talk about the person that lifts them up. Because sometimes you don't lift them up by trying to tell them things are going to be okay, because they don't need to hear that. Sometimes you just need to be there. Sometimes words cannot console the grief, the pain of what life takes from us. Words just can't. Sometimes if I could just teach a lesson on what it means to lift up your companion. I wish I could tell some of these preachers who visit these hospital rooms and these families when they have loved ones to die, that sometimes your words mean nothing. Sometimes it's just your presence. Yeah. He says you need somebody. Because sometimes you will fall. And you have come to some low times and low moments in your life. I want to teach this lesson because so many people when they have them falls and low times in their life, they turn to substances, drugs, alcohol, gambling, trying to fill that empty space that only friendship and companionship can satisfy. So many people don't understand you can't substitute relationships. You can't substitute companions. You can't substitute people. You can't use things and you can't have activities. You can't create hobbies to take the place of people. Drugs can't speak back to you. Vacations can't satisfy you. Yeah. Hobbies can't pass away the time. You need a companion. I don't give nobody no dating advice after they lose a spouse. All I'm going to say is get back out there. Meet somebody. Go to dinner with somebody. If you can't do nothing, sit on the porch in your rocking chair and hold each other's hand. Yeah. You can't survive without companionship and relationships. I'm almost finished. This is always the hardest sermon to preach on Mother's Day. But let me give some scriptural context to my sermon. Adam got all of this in the perfect garden with the perfect environment. He is wise. He has fellowship with God. He and God walks every evening in the cool of the evening in the garden every evening. Yeah. Adam and God is together. Adam and God has fellowship. Adam and God has communion. And one day God showed up to go walking with Adam. And he looked at Adam and said, it ain't good for that boy to be alone. I'm going to create him a helpmate. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? If not, let me explain it to you. You need more than God to make it in this world. He created Eve as a helpmate to be with Adam, to help Adam celebrate his success, but to be a companion to lift him up. Because Adam had communion with God, but he didn't have communion with anybody else but God. And so God said it's not good for man to be alone. So he made him a helpmate. But look at what this text says in verse 10, the B clause. But woe to him who is alone when he falls. Oh, my brothers and sisters, Dr. Manuel Scott called it a valid day. Don't have a valid day and ain't got nobody to call, nobody to talk to, nobody to reach out. Nobody. And that word woe is a strong word. There are some days you just need to be around people. And you just need people around you. Amen. Don't you have them days when you are alone? He says, woe to the person who is alone when they fall. Let me give you this next thing, because he says this in verse 11, but I got to just deal with the C clause, for he has no one to lift or to help him up. I thank God for the people who God has sent into my life to lift me up when I have fallen down. Sometimes the people that lift me up, I don't even know them. They just passing by. I never will forget the woman who is in my neighborhood who walks her dog every day. And sometimes we never speak. She just walks her dog every day, 4 times a day. She's walking up and down the street with her dog. And one day I was having a low day, a valley day, a day of despair. And for whatever reason, God might have just triggered her to stop and to engage me. And she stopped. And that one conversation lifted me up. Because emotionally I had fallen. The only thing that made her come into my yard was how pretty my yard is. I really wanted to say that, to say this: the prettier the things are in your life, the more frequently people will want to visit it and check in. I just said something, you'll get that on the way home. If you're always mad, always angry, never smile, never have anything positive, people won't want to stop to visit, to engage. So you need people when you're successful, but you need people when trouble comes. But let me give you this, what he says in verse 11. You need people in times of loneliness and despair. Because that's different from trouble. Troubles are the activities that happen, circumstances that evolve. You don't expect them. You didn't see them coming. And sometimes troubles are just the natural things that happen in our life, like old age and death. That's just troubles that you just can't, they just come. But listen, he says you need somebody when loneliness and despair. Look at what he says. I mean, you see this in the verse, and he says, if two lie together, they can keep warm. But how can one be warmed alone? I wish you could do and look at the research I look at. You know the number one thing that's keeping Americans up at night, keeping them peeled up, keeping them strung out, keeping them high, is loneliness. People are more alone, feel more alone in a world where we are so connected, digitally, social media. We got cars and we live in neighborhoods, but people are lonely. In a world with so many people, where digital technology connects us all by the push of a button. We live in social groups, but people are lonely. And let me tell you, ain't no worse feeling than to be married to somebody and live in the same house with them and you still lonely. Solomon says you need somebody because there are going to be times in your life where you feel loneliness and despair. A further study of this text, he really talks about a desert experience. He talks about, because you know in the desert, as hot as it is in the daytime, it's just as cold as at night. But Solomon says you can make it in the day, but you get stuck in the desert at night. And the two are stuck in the desert and they lie together. They get close to each other. They can make it off of each other's body heat. They both mutually got heat to give. And they got to lay down their pride, lay down their selfishness, and come together. If they got any differences that night in the desert, they better put aside them differences. If they got any disagreements, they better put aside them disagreements. I know how we love to use the Bible. But have you ever read that verse that says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath? You should never let anger survive past 24 hours. You shouldn't go to bed angry. Because if you go to bed angry, you wake up angry. Sometimes what keeps us from lying together and being there in times of loneliness and despair really don't amount to that much. I'm glad y'all listening today because listen, he says you need somebody in times of loneliness, but listen, I want to talk about that you need people in times of despair because despair is way deeper than loneliness. Loneliness is when you can't find somebody to satisfy your loneliness. But despair is when you find somebody and you still ain't happy. You still ain't satisfied. You got everything you needed in life, wanted in life, worked for in life, and yet you are still in despair. Well, that's a bad and sad place. Solomon says you need somebody because he says in this particular text, again, if two lie together, they can keep warm. How can one be warmed alone? So many people got so much, and yet they are in despair. You ain't got but one more. But I'm telling you, so many people are lonely and in despair. Some people can't find somebody to satisfy their loneliness. Some people find somebody, but still despair Let me give it to you like this, because you'll get it when I give you this modern example. You ever been hungry and wanted something? You just had a taste of something, and when you got it, it just didn't satisfy. And you ended up leaving more on the plate than you did in your mouth. And I can tell you, because you really don't know what it is you're hungry for. If I had time, I'd explain to you. Sometimes you're looking for what you're not looking for. What you're looking for. Let me give you this last one, because he says this one. Then this, I think, is the most critical. Because he says, not only do you need somebody when you're successful and when trouble comes in times of loneliness and despair, but you need somebody in times of war and difficulty. Because look what he says. Though one may be overpowered, two can withstand him. He is painting the picture of an enemy. It might be invisible. It might be an enemy that is common. It might be an uncommon enemy only known to one. You might be under attack by a common enemy, or one who just might be attacked by an enemy known only to themselves. Let me tell you something. You need somebody in times of war, and sometimes when these enemies come up against you. Two things happened in high school, and everybody in here going to be able to relate. Either you were bullied, or you was a bully. Do I have any witnesses in here? Everybody in here can relate to one of the two. Either you were bullied, or you were the bully. And we used to have, when I grew up, there was some Ball brothers. B-A-L-L. 6 of them, and they were all brothers. And let me tell you, if you fought one, you had to fight them all. If you fought Terry, you had to fight Al. And if you fought Al, you had to fight Michael. You couldn't bully one of them boys. Because if you bullied one and he went back and told the other, if you told Michael school let out at 3:30 and meet you at the park, he would never show up alone. We asked him one day, why y'all always have to fight together? He said, because our mama told us that if one of us come home beat up, all of us better have some bruises, scars, and dirt. You'll get that on the way home. Because together, you're strong. With somebody, you can withstand. And even if you lose in defeat, at least you didn't get defeated alone. Yeah. My brothers and sisters, you need somebody in times of war, in times of difficulties, when the road gets rough, and the going gets tough. I got to give you this example. Look at what Jesus said to his disciples when they were in the last week of his life. Jesus was about to face the most difficult trial. He had already predicted that Judas would betray him, the Romans would arrest him, and the Jews would accuse him. And Jesus was in despair. Jesus felt alone. And Jesus had healed the sick, raised the dead, given sight to the blind. Jesus had comforted the widow of Nain by raising her son from the dead. Jesus had fed 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. Jesus had got the divine approval of his Father twice, once in the Jordan, the other time on the Mount of Transfiguration. This is my beloved Son, to whom I'm well pleased. But in the last week of Jesus' life, in the last hour, in the most difficult time of war and difficulty, Jesus says, come and with me. Come and watch with me while I pray. Jesus wasn't going to go into that time of prayer in the garden by himself. And Jesus didn't ask them to pray with him. But he says, come and watch while I pray. You pray. Jesus understood the importance of having people around you and with you in times of difficulty. Just their physical presence, just their tangible presence, just to have somebody in your environment. Jesus went, prayed, came back, and they were asleep. And Jesus said, could you not watch 1 hour while I pray? Went back, came back, they were asleep again. Went back the third time, and they were asleep again. But Jesus didn't chastise them. Jesus didn't write them off. Jesus didn't put them out. Jesus didn't chastise them. Because Jesus knew the value of having people there in times of war and difficulty. And then this last verse that he says, and a 3-fold cord cannot easily be broken. Now, what is Solomon saying this morning? I'm going to close with this. Because he has been talking about 2, from verse 9 to verse 12. From verse 9, 10, and 11, he's been talking about 2. And then all of a sudden in verse 12, he talks about 3. Oh, you ain't shouting, but you finna shout now. You need people. You need somebody in times of success, in times of trouble, in times of loneliness, in despair, in times of war and difficulty. But then he says a 3-fold cord is not easily broken. He talks about having somebody, a physical human being. And then Sister Coleman, he closes by saying a 3-fold cord. What is this third person fitting? I can tell you 2 are physical and the third person is spiritual. You need people, you need somebody, but you need God in that. I'm not an electrician. But I do know there's a red and a white. But then there's another one in there, they call it a brown light. It keeps the electric and the positive and negative charge from clashing in it, and it weighs out the power that both of them have, because it keeps everything grounded. You got to know when to shout. Yeah, you need somebody, but you need God to keep it together, to hold it together, to keep everything grounded. He ain't talking about adding a third physical person. He said, since you're going to start trying to tie and make a rope, put God in. And let me tell you something. It can't be easy. Can't be easy, bro. You say to me, Pastor, I have my other cord has been broken. She's gone, he's gone, they gone. But you're still here because there was a third cord in there. You got to know when to shout. You had some ups and downs. And you suffered some losses. And you said, well, they ain't here no more. It's just, but that third cord kept y'all together. But now that third cord is keeping you. It's not easily broken. We had a young man who preached in the final class at Mississippi Baptist Seminary. He was a young man who got up and preached, and he preached the subject, what manner of man is this? And it was a good sermon, but and he was kind of a novice. He really just wasn't used to preaching in that environment. He got up and talked about what manner of man is this, and he closed the sermon by asking the question, what manner of man is this? But those of us who are more seasoned preachers said to him, you got up and told us what manner of man is this, but you didn't tell us what his name was. And listen, I can't leave without telling you what the third cord's name is. His name is Jesus. He is the one. His name is Jesus. And Mama said he bred in a starving land. Water when I'm thirsty. A battle axe in a time of war. You need Jesus with you. Get somebody, get people, but you still need. And somebody in here know if it had not been for the Lord on your side, where would you be? He kept your enemies away, turned your darkest night into a shiny day. If it had not been for the Lord on your side. And listen, I'm telling you, I'm glad to know him. But more than that, Pastor, I'm glad he know me. I got him. But I shout because he got me. I know his name, but he knows my name. And when I can't reach up, he reaches down. That boy that preached his final sermon to close out our seminary class for this semester, he talked about what manner of man is this, and he used that illustration when Jesus had got through teaching according to Matthew and Mark and told his disciples to get on the boat, and Jesus gave them instructions to get on the boat, and Jesus got on the boat with them and went down in the boat and went to sleep, and while Jesus was asleep, a storm came. He made his argument, a pretty good argument. But you know, when you get up and give the introduction, you can't preach what the preacher's already preached. But boy, I said, if that was me, I wouldn't have had but 3 points. And my 3 points would have been this. that when you follow Jesus, sometimes you follow him into a storm.
That's right. Say that. Say it now.
Following Jesus don't exempt you from running into storms, because you do know Jesus told them to get on the boat.
Yeah.
Jesus led them into the storm. They were in the storm because they were following Jesus. Can I give you this next point I gave you? Secondly, I would have told them, just because you got Jesus don't mean storms ain't coming. Because Jesus was with them on the boat. They was with Jesus. Jesus was with them, and still a storm came. You ain't exempt from storms because you got Jesus. You ain't exempt from storms because you love the Lord. Come to church, storms will come, and you got Jesus. Sister Bird ought to close with this one. Even though they were in the storm because they was following Jesus and they had Jesus with them on the boat, but it was Jesus that got them through the storm. I declare you got to know when to shout. You might get in the storm following Jesus. You might have Jesus and storms still come, but that same Jesus got them out. Because he woke up, stood up, spoke up, and said, peace. Be still. Michael, they teach us imagination in preaching. Now, can you imagine Jesus waking up because they said, care not that we perish? And when Jesus woke up, he got up and he said, where is your faith? And as Jesus rolled over, pulled back the cover, chastised his disciples, went out on the stern of the boat, and he didn't make any dramatic presentation. He just said, peace. Be still. The wind quit blowing. The storm quieted down. Them clouds that was full of precipitation turned back white. And because they had no precipitation, they vanished like a vapor. And behind them dark clouds stood the sun. And because they had Jesus, peace was restored. In the middle of a storm, every head bowed and every eye closed. You need a friend. But you also need Jesus. Because he says a threefold cord is not easily broken. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege it is to carry everything to God in prayer. And we don't often sing this part. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise and forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou will find solace What a friend we have in Jesus.
Yes.
All our sins and griefs to bear. The door of the church is open. My brothers and sisters, what a message.